Hello, everyone. My name's Noah. This is my dad, Mike, and we are the Mental Cases.
The mental cases.
Yes. Today, we are going to talk about something, very close to both of us, and that our love of the, major comic book icons of Marvel and DC. And the funny story about us with Marvel and DC in terms of its, competition is that we've switched sides where he started as like a DC and moved to Marvel, and I started as a Marvel and moved to DC, which for, most fandom fans is weird, you know?
And this is our first video for the channel, and so we picked this broad topic to kind of showcase what we want this channel to be about, which is about, first, it's really not so much like movie reviews as much as it is discussing our experiences as being a part of these various fandoms in comic books or sci-fi or fantasy or video games,
Right.
and also to talk about the difference in generations. I'm a Generation X.
I'm a millennial.
Right, and so we have sort of years of developmental differences and experiences regarding these fandoms.
Right, and yet
so we have to bring something special in that.
Yeah, we're more or less fans of the same thing as, with Marvel and DC and everything. And despite that, we're still fans together as father and son.
Yes. And so let's get started. So first I want to say is that it's not so much I switched to Marvel, but I admitted defeat. I admit that Marvel beat DC in the movies. That the MCU is the ultimate superhero media experience ever, and DC lost the war.
Right.
There was an Infinity War, and DC lost the Infinity War. That's who lost the Infinity War. They got dusted.
Right.
It was DC, and I admit that. And even though I love DC, and I still love DC, I admit that the Marvel movies are special. Like, they really are special.
Yes, they've definitely elevated what Marvel was.
Yes.
Because by the 90s, early 2000s, Marvel was kind of struggling.
Oh.
And its iconicity. I mean, the early X-Men movies and Spider-Man movies were loved. Some were everyone wasn't hyped about it. And then 2008 hit with Iron Man, and everyone loved it.
Yeah, it definitely took it to a whole other level. It brought back the serial, like the movie serial, which it doesn't get any credit for. Back in the 30s and 40s, movies were, movies had sequels that were, 14 episodes in, because there were serials, and it kind of brought that back. So, going back in time. So my first question for you, Noah, is, what did you like about Marvel? And I asked that because, when you were a boy, I bought you were maybe 9 or 10.
Right.
And I bought you these encyclopedia books of superheroes. They were white hardcover books.
Right, I think I still have them, actually.
Yeah, they're probably still in the house somewhere. And I loved them. I couldn't wait to get them for you. Mm-hmm. And I got you 6, and I got 3 of each side. I got 3 Marvel. I got the Hulk, I got Spider-Man, and I think I got the X-Men. Mm-hmm. And I got Batman, Superman, and I think I got Justice League. So that there was this balance. So you could go through all of it.
Right.
And then, I don't know, maybe I got to use this for Christmas or your birthday or something. And then a couple of weeks later, in your bedroom, I remember this very vividly, all the Marvel were spread out on your bed and on the floor, and they're all opened, and obviously you've been going through them, looking at them, and all the DC were still on the shelf with a coat of dust on them. They hadn't been moved. You had no interest. What drew you to Marvel at such a at that age?
My most immediate memory is probably relatability. Marvel, for whatever reason, can do relatability extremely well, and at a young developmental age, I was very much relating to these characters. I'm kind of geeky, so I got a little bit into Spider-Man. Feeling social pressures or whatever, I could totally understand something like the Hulk and wanting to let out anger and whatnot. So Marvel definitely got me at a young age because I was still developing with its relatability.
I find when I think of myself at that age with Marvel, and again, I'm talking about the 1970s.
Right.
Okay, but still, Marvel, is that
The before time.
in the before time, it didn't make me. I didn't like the way it made me feel. I liked the characters, but I didn't like the way it made me feel. So, for example, like I thought Wolverine was a jerk. I didn't like Wolverine. I mean, I like him now, but I mean, as a boy, I was like, he's a rotten person. Even the Hulk TV show, with Bill Bixby, at the end it's so sad. He's hitchhiking. It was always like sad, right? And I was like, nobody likes Bill Bixby. It was always
how could
painful.
you not like Bill Bixby?
Right. It was always, it was always emotionally painful for me.
Right.
Whereas I was into DC, and I still like DC for this reason, in spite of them losing, is that I didn't relate to them. That DC were ideal heroes. That they were perfection. They were sort of like the Greek gods.
Right.
They were almost immortals and existing as ideal forms. I liked that Superman was sort of perfect. That Batman was sort of pure. That's what I like about Batman to this day.
Right.
His purity and his perfection.
Right, and for me, that's what eventually drew me into DC. Is that, like, as I kind of got older, it's like, yeah, they're relatable, but they're not exactly the best superheroes. Their flaws almost kind of make them not great heroes.
Well, that's funny you should say that, because one of the things
For
that
Marvel,
made me give up on DC, at least in the movies, is, and maybe even other recent incarnations, is that DC has been trying to be like Marvel. Instead of trying to be its own thing.
It's bringing down their icons
Right.
to, like, being super broken and relatable.
Right, like, I don't want
a
a brooding Superman. I don't want Superman brooding and...
right, that's kind of the problem they've always had.
But I was... I don't know when it became a problem. But I was fine with it. I was happy with a confident, happy, well-adjusted Superman who had a mom and a dad and a dog. I mean, I was...
Right.
I was okay with that.
I think that started around the time Marvel had started coming out with movies with, like, X-Men and Raimi's Spider-Man. I think once Marvel had slowly come back from, like, the 90s and started to actually gain more traction, DC looked at them and was like, ooh, they're starting to do better. We're not doing better. We need to start being like them.
Yeah, and that's always a mistake. A mistake for a competing universe is making the other your goal or your barometer. Right. I either need to be like them or I need to find something opposite of them. That's not the same as finding yourself.
Right.
And DC didn't need that. DC had found itself. DC had found itself before Marvel,
Right, and that's kind of the funny thing too, because when you look at stuff like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice or the recent Justice League, it's like they're almost verbatim ripping off what Marvel is doing. Like, if I remember the basic plot of Justice League, it's more or less what they ended up doing in Infinity War. Big CGI guy coming to Earth to end everything, crazy amounts of destruction. The superheroes have to save everything. It's like DC was verbatim copying, and nobody wanted to see that because they weren't copying it to the same level or anything.
Are there any moments where you almost gave up on Marvel? Like really? I mean, like, questioned your own fandom in Marvel.
I don't think so, but there are definite, like, points where it's like, okay, why'd you have to do it that way? Like, I think one, in terms of comics, not movies, but in terms of comics, like, I was actually, when I was a little bit younger, a huge fan of the Ultimate Universe, where it was a complete redo of it all, where it was tried to be a bit more realistic, a bit more gritty and everything, and I was kind of into that, because it was also a fresh start to, just jump in. However, like, it eventually came to this, like, comic book storyline called Ultimatum, which is, like, horrifically gory and screwed up for horror and gore's sake. And it's really screwed up, and I'm just sitting there like, why'd you ruin the Ultimate Universe like that? Why did you bring it that screwed up? It didn't need to be like that. What's wrong with you? And, like, little aspects like that, and when stories in Marvel get like that, it's like really like, ugh. Like, you're relatable in your, like, flawed stuff, but, like, when you get that level, it's like, okay, I don't know if I want to be a fan of this.
I think my low point was the trailer for Batman and Robin,
for DC.
For DC, because I liked Tim Burton's Batman. I like Batman Returns. I'm still a fan of Batman Returns.
Mm-hmm.
But I hated Batman Forever. Another video will be how Batman Forever is actually the worst Batman movie ever. Batman and Robin is at least so stupid you can sit through it. But but I hated Batman Forever. I was so disappointed and miserable. And so then the trailer for Batman and Robin came out, and it looked stupid. It had Arnold with the ice puns and all that. It was already looking bad. Mm-hmm. But then the very last scene of it, when it finally says Batman and Robin, the last scene is the scene when the capsule explodes and you see Batman and Robin surfing on the doors.
Yeah.
I saw that on TV, and I thought, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. This is too dumb. And it was so dumb, and I was so disappointed in Batman and superheroes and all that, that I didn't see Batman Begins in the theater.
Right.
In spite of my love of Batman. Yes, because I just couldn't go through the heartbreak. I could not go through that misery.
Right. And however, Batman Begins definitely brought some credibility back.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
the Dark Knight trilogy in general. It's, the weird thing about DC in my mind is that, somehow, despite being the company with, the longer history and, more honestly iconic characters, they've somehow became the underdog in all of this. And I think there's actually a crucial moment when they became it.
Okay, so when did they become the underdog, and why?
I think it was when Superman stopped being the popular one and Batman became the popular one.
That's interesting. Why do you?
Because
I have a theory why that happened, but why do you think that has to do with?
Because in my mind, it's how they kind of approach themselves. When DC had a hardcore grip on the market with all of their comics and the Superman the movie and everything, they were like Superman. They were, strong, confident and everything. But then, they felt like they needed to be Marvel. They needed to be more brooding. They needed to be more realistic. That's when The Dark Knight Returns and stuff comes out, and that's when Batman started to make the shift.
Well, that's funny, because I also equate that to the change in America.
Really?
So, yes. Superman is number one when America is a superpower and on the rise. America is in its prime.
Right.
So from 1950s to the 1990s, Superman is the number one superhero of all superheroes, because that's America in its prime.
Right.
It's an ideal world, truth, justice, the American way.
Right.
After 9/11, we've sort of been on the other end of a cultural decline.
Right.
And whether we want to admit that or not. But,
right.
But I'll admit it, we are.
Okay.
We've been in a 20-year cultural decline where we live in a darker, grittier,
we
less
basically
confident.
live in Gotham.
Right. We changed from being, really, to be honest, we went from being Metropolis to Gotham. And when America went from being Metropolis to Gotham, the main focus became Superman. But that also opened up Batman. But that also became the reason why Marvel was, also
right, because they had always kind of
been
a kind of Gotham. They weren't as bad as Gotham, but they were always kind of.
They all belonged in Gotham.
Right.
All the Marvel heroes
and
could
villains
be Gotham villains, like
right,
the Hulk could be a
Spider-Man,
Gotham villain.
right?
Spider-Man could be a Gotham villain.
Oh man,
they all could be like Batman's nemesis.
Right.
I also think one of the problems. So I think a giant cultural shift led to that. It's to combine with what you're saying. I also think one thing that is held against DC is that DC spent a longer time historically making comics for kids as opposed to young men. So in the past, comics weren't aimed towards the 18 to 35 demographic like they are now.
Right.
Okay. They were aimed towards under 12, under 10.
Right.
So they were dumb and silly and simplistic.
Right.
And
that's basically all of the golden and silver age.
Right. So it was the audience was different. And it wasn't even what these kids wanted. It's what adults thought these kids wanted too.
Right.
So it gets into this even more bizarre place. So if you go back and you read old DC comics, they become ludicrous. I mean,
everything. Like Superman can create a small version of himself. Right. His hand or something. He can pull an entire solar system out of a black hole.
Right.
Mr. Mxyzptlk probably came up
all
in
of Superboy. The whole idea of Superboy is to appeal to kids. You know what I mean? And Crypto, he has a super dog. I mean, it's all about that's something that's aimed towards children.
Right, and then the
Whereas,
Super Friends
right.
and whatnot.
So it wasn't until DC didn't actually catch up into the 1835 demographic until Superman the movie, and then it started moving forward. But I think Marvel had always sort of aimed a little higher. Marvel was always aiming a little more 12-year-old, 15-year-old. It was trying to add a little more complexity.
Because even in like the 60s and 70s, you had like, I believe that's around the time when Gwen Stacy died. And like big shocker moments for like a bunch of superheroes that were like, whoa, this is in a comic?
Oh yeah, even if you watch the old Spider-Man, the famous, the
memes 60s?
Which I used to watch. It was on TV all the time in the 70s. In some of the episodes, it has this really bizarre psychedelic watercolor background. So it's Spider-Man, and he's swinging through the streets and swinging over buildings, and in the background, instead of a sky or instead of the sun, it's just like these like this Rorschach red and green and blue colors. Like, it's disturbing. Like, it's really weird. Disturbing. And even as a kid, I was like, what is this about? Why is he in a painting?
Right. Why is this cartoon being this intense? Like, I'm 6. I don't need it to be this intense.
Right. Why do I have to be? Why do I have to be high already? I'm only 8.
I'm only 8. I don't need pot now.
Yeah. So all right? So let's finish up. What's your What is your favorite and least favorite thing about Marvel?
Okay, my favorite thing would probably be the Hulk. I've always been a fan of the Hulk. He's, I've of all the relatable things that, people relate to, I've always kind of related to Bruce Banner and his anger issues, to be honest. I've had some, I'm just going to say that. And the idea of just him breaking out into this giant hulking thing and being able to solve the problem like that, just as a younger kid, always spoke to me. For whatever reason, like, I would have loved to Hulk out and, like, just say screw you to whatever I was dealing with. In terms of my least favorite thing, honestly, what it's become is how they hero, basically. Like, one of the things I've really started to lament as I got older is, like that iconic scene where, like, Spider-Man leaves his costume in the garbage. That's like a police officer just not policing for a day.
Right.
It's like, that's not what a good hero does. Yes, it's a relatable story. I know all that, but it's like, that's not a good hero. You don't just throw in your badge one day. It's like, I'm just not going to police for, a week. Let's see how the city goes. I've always I've started to really lament their flaws.
Oh. My favorite, my first love was Superman, but my true love is Batman.
Right.
And what I like about Batman isn't so much anger. Well, it's sort of anger. It's similar to yours, but what I like about Batman is that he's going to make them pay.
Right. It's always the vigilante. No, judgment needs to be served
now, and it needs to be served brutally, and you deserve everything that's happening to you.
Right.
I that part of it. But I think, in a general sense, what I like about DC again is that there is sort of a perfected idealism in DC. Like, when you think of the Justice League, the Justice League really is the ultimate group of superheroes.
Right, the pantheon.
Yes, you know. And I think what I don't like about DC, and this is why I declared Marvel and at least the MCU the winner, is what I don't like about DC is that DC has lost its way, in my opinion. Maybe not in the comics as much, but still, I in other genres and other mediums, I find that it's lost its way. There's nothing really interesting going on anymore with various, whether it's cartoons, the movies have flopped.
Right.
Really, they're mediocre at best.
The live action TV shows are pretty good, but you're not really that interested.
Well, those, I'll say that those are, I'll give the DC the shows. But what pains me is that they have to have shows about their B-listers. I'm glad that Supergirl's big, and I've seen the episode of Supergirl. I think it's great, and I get why everybody loves it. It makes sense to me. But I want to see Superman be the A-lister.
Right.
And hopefully people at DC are listening, at Warner Brothers, and you can do this because this is all in company. Now that Game of Thrones is done,
or it's ending,
I would like to see the A-listers have their own shows on HBO, like HBO Game of Thrones production level of a Superman show, of a
Right.
Batman show,
Right.
of a Wonder Woman show,
And you
or
know,
maybe even a live action, and maybe even
Right, right,
live
right.
action Justice League. But in other words, you're not gonna be able to compete with Marvel in the movies. You can't. They won. They won. Disney won. Marvel won.
right.
But you own HBO. You own, Warner Bros. Owns HBO and
Mhm.
DC. There's some peanut butter and jelly that could go together right there.
Right, and what really shows that that might be a better pass is the animated series. We've recently jumped back a bit and started watching some
The
of
old animated
the
series
old
from the
animated
90s,
Steve
yeah.
from the 90s and early 2000s, and like honestly, they did episodic, serialized shows really well.
Yeah, very well. Very,
Like despite there being cartoons, they're
and
really
the limitations
good.
of animation, it was
Right,
very
and
well.
like Superman.
So imagine
and
then.
Batman.
So imagine a Batman television show with the production value of Game of Thrones, or League of Justice, Justice League, on the production level of Game
Right,
of
that would be
Thrones.
awesome.
Right, and that's where they could win. So
But with
hopefully,
the writing of like the animated series, with like like properly getting the characters across.
all right. Well, I think that's
About it.
About it for our first episode.
Mm-hmm.
So tune in. Make sure you subscribe and check us out on Twitter.
Right.
And check us out on Facebook. We'll have a Facebook page for the mental cases and our Patreon page.
Right.
And support the channel.
Right. Leave a like and a comment. We'll definitely get to it and look it all over. Thank you for watching.
All right. Thank you.